They didn't even give me a damn pen. 30 years, 3 decades. And when it was over, they didn't hand me a plaque, a watch, or even a company-branded pen. Just a bland email from HR scheduling a transition meeting. And now, here I was, sitting across a glass conference table from a man I once mentored, being told that the company I helped build had outgrown me. My name is Michael Rhodes. I'm 58 years old, or as the CEO kindly put it, from a different era. I was the Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Armitage Global, a firm I joined back when it was still operating out of a rented floor above a dentist's office in Midtown. I was 28 then, hungry, relentless. I helped shape its M&A roadmap, steered it through the dot-com bust, then again through the 2008 crisis. I gave my life to that place. And now I was staring at a CEO who wouldn't even look me in the eye. "Michael," he began, adjusting the cuffs on his wrinkle-free linen shirt, "we're pivoting toward a more digital-first infrastructure. We need voices that resonate with the emerging demographic." I waited. No apology, no handshake, just a corporate euthanasia wrapped in buzzwords. "So," I said slowly, "you're replacing me with a TikTok influencer." He chuckled like it was a joke, but we both knew it wasn't. Tyler Jensen, 26. Just graduated from some MBA light startup program that probably had a pool table in the classroom. 200,000 followers who loved his hot takes on disrupting legacy systems. I once caught him using ChatGPT to draft a proposal he didn't understand. Now he was going to lead the strategy division I built from scratch. "I hope you understand, Michael," the CEO said, his fingers interlaced on the table. "It's not personal." Of course not. It's never personal, until you're alone with a cardboard box and the weight of your own silence. I didn't speak. Not when he said the words, not when the HR director handed me the severance paperwork with a smile that tried too hard. Not even when I passed my old office and saw a junior analyst already eyeing the leather chair like a vulture. I packed what little they hadn't digitized, one photo of my daughter on her college graduation day, a brass paperweight shaped like a knight's helmet, and a fountain pen my wife gave me on our 20th anniversary, that at least I'd brought from home. As I made my way down the hallway, the air shifted, conversations softened, eye contact vanished. The same people who'd sought my input, thanked me in quarterly calls, laughed at my dry jokes, they turned into ghosts, too polite to acknowledge me, too cowardly to offer a goodbye. I was already a relic. When the elevator doors closed behind me, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. No anger yet, just a tight, hollow ache right behind my ribs. Like something sacred had been scooped out without anesthesia. Outside, the city was loud and oblivious. I hailed a cab and told the driver to take the long way home. I needed a few more minutes to recalibrate, to figure out what the hell just happened to my life. My wife, Elise, met me at the door with a look that said everything. She didn't cry, neither did I. We sat at the kitchen island while I poured 2 fingers of Lagavulin over a single cube of ice. I stared at the amber swirl in the glass and felt like a man watching his own obituary being written in real time. "I thought you'd be angrier," she said gently. "I'm tired," I replied, "and I don't think it's hit me yet." I opened my laptop, logged into LinkedIn, and stared at my profile for a long minute. My title was still there, my endorsements, my carefully curated achievements, a timeline of relevance. Then I hit delete. I didn't want their endorsements. I didn't want to chase some glorified executive coach path or post a vague announcement about new opportunities. I wanted silence, just for a while. That night, I sat alone in the backyard beside the fire pit Elise bought last Christmas. The flames danced quietly, indifferent to everything. I sipped the last of my scotch, listening to the wind push through the trees. My dog, Scout, curled at my feet, unaware that the man beside him had just lost something he couldn't name. I thought about the first time I walked into Armitage. I was wearing a second-hand suit, carrying a borrowed briefcase. I remembered the late nights, the quiet wins, the years spent chasing someone else's dream because I thought it would become mine. I remembered being called essential, visionary, indispensable, but not anymore. "I gave them everything," I whispered into the fire, "and they didn't even give me a pen." I woke up later than usual, 7:12 a.m., a far cry from the 5:30 alarms that used to yank me out of bed every morning for 30 years. My mornings now were slower, quieter. I drank my coffee without checking market trends, sat on the porch with Scout while the neighborhood began to stir, and wondered if the fire inside me was out for good. For the past 5 weeks, I'd been trying to do what people said was healthy. I meditated, downloaded apps that played rain sounds and whispered affirmations. I even tried fly fishing for a weekend, which I hated in college and confirmed I still hated now. I sat on a rock in some god-forsaken stream in upstate New York, holding a stupid pole, and realized I hadn't caught anything but silence. Therapy was next. Elise nudged me into it, gently, lovingly, the way she does when she knows I'm spiraling and pretending not to be. But even the therapist couldn't reach the part of me that had been amputated. I didn't miss the job. I missed being needed. I missed solving puzzles no one else saw, reading boardroom tension like weather patterns, knowing when to act and when to wait. Without that, who the hell was I? Elise kept telling me to let go. "Start something new, Michael," she'd say, rubbing my shoulder. "You've always talked about that think tank idea." But every time I opened a fresh page, I couldn't write. I'd built a life around strategy, precision, and discipline. And now, I felt like a retired general being told to take up watercolor painting. Then came the call. I was in the garage looking for a wrench when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something made me tap accept. "Michael, it's Jenna Chang." I hadn't heard from her in years, but the voice came back instantly, calm, sharp, always 3 steps ahead. She'd been in business development, ran point on some of our toughest international expansions before she left for a competitor on the West Coast. "Jenna," I said, surprised. "Wow, how long's it been?" "Too long. Look, I'll be quick. I shouldn't even be calling you." I stepped outside and closed the garage door behind me. "What's going on?" "Your replacement, Tyler, he's running Armitage into the ground." I said nothing, just let the silence stretch. "He launched this rebranding campaign, Armitage 2.0, all bright colors and slogans. But he didn't run it through compliance. And get this, he's bundled new service tiers that violate half our long-term client contracts. It's a disaster. Legal is scrambling, finance is livid." A bird chirped somewhere in the oak tree above me. I leaned against the wall, letting her words settle. "And," she continued, voice lower now, "he's been name-dropping you in internal meetings, saying he's cleaning up legacy inefficiencies. Claims your policies created friction in the pipeline." "Of course he is," I said, jaw tightening. "Because the best way to hide your incompetence is to blame the man who built the foundation." She exhaled. "I thought you should know." "Why tell me?" "Because I remember what you built, and what you did for me when that deal in Singapore nearly imploded. You backed me when no one else would, just figured you deserved to hear it from someone who still respects you." I thanked her. We hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the air shift. The sun was warm, but something cold began to stir under my skin. I went inside and climbed the stairs to my study. Elise was out. Scout followed me in and curled up beside the desk. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out something I hadn't touched since the last merger war, an old leather-bound notebook. My playbook. Inside were names, real names, contacts at firms, quiet alliances, scenarios I'd gamed out years ago in case of hostile takeovers, PR crises, client pivots. Strategies no one knew about but me. I flipped past scrawled timelines and flowcharts, through a section labeled, "If They Ever Turn." I hadn't thought about this part of myself in years, the version of me that played chess when everyone else played checkers. The man who didn't speak loudly because he didn't have to. Because when I moved, it was final. I ran a hand over the paper, reading through notes on vendor vulnerabilities, exec profiles, and a discrete list of back-channel client grievances that never made it to formal documentation. Then I turned to a clean page and wrote one word in capital letters: leverage. And just like that, something inside me clicked back into place. Not rage, not even revenge, clarity. The garage became my war room. It started with a folding table, an old corkboard, and a few legal pads. Then came the printouts, client rosters, quarterly earnings, leaked memos Jenna had forwarded through an encrypted channel. I ran Ethernet straight from the router, propped up a second monitor on top of a paint can, and taped a note to the wall above it that read, "Control the board, or get swept off it." I wasn't out for revenge, not exactly. I didn't want my job back. I didn't want to walk those halls again, breathe in that recycled air thick with false smiles and ambition. No, what I wanted was truth, naked and brutal. I wanted the truth to rip through Armitage like a well-placed charge in a rotten foundation. Not loud, precise. I started with a name, Frank Vallon. He used to run international strategy under me. Left 3 years ago for Capexon, one of our direct competitors. We hadn't spoken since he'd jumped ship, but we'd shared late nights, war stories, and quiet drinks when deals felt like trenches. I sent a message through Proton Mail. Want to hear something interesting? He replied in 20 minutes. Call me. Frank had already heard about Tyler's campaign. It's a joke, Mike. Your boy rebranded Armitage like it was a juice startup. No market testing, no risk analysis, just color gradients and hashtags. I've got clients asking if your old firm's drunk. I asked if he'd noticed any unusual movement, client defections, vendor hesitations, anything off book. He hesitated. Nothing confirmed, but there's noise. Their Q3 projections don't line up with supplier reports. Something's not clean. Would you take them on? I asked. You offering a playbook? I didn't answer, but we both knew I had one. Next, I called Nadine Quell. She was in private equity now, managing a multi-billion-dollar fund that circled failing firms like a hawk scanning for limp rabbits. Nadine was surgical, cold, the kind of professional who could smell fear through spreadsheets. I hear Armitage is flashing shiny numbers, I said. She laughed. Every bubble floats before the pop. Why do you care? They're lying to investors, I said plainly. Their Q2 revenue includes projected renewals. Tyler's repackaged client forecasts as actuals. It's all buzzwords and velocity talk. There's no runway, just fog and mirrors. You have proof? Not yet, I said, but I know where to get it. She leaned in, figuratively, over the phone line. You want a fire sale? I want a spotlight. She paused. Keep me posted. I hung up and sat back in the creaky garage chair, staring at the glowing monitor. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. There were a dozen journalists I could have gone to, but only one who still understood the game beneath the numbers, Claire Baird. She wrote for Capital Current, a digital rag with teeth. Claire had exposed 3 major CEO downfalls in the last decade. We'd crossed paths years ago when she covered Armitage's aggressive South American expansion. She didn't owe me anything, but she respected clean intel. I created a burner email under the name M. Sable. I wrote carefully. Attached redacted internal reports Jenna had shared, contracts with misaligned renewal clauses, rebranding decks missing compliance checks, statements of work never signed. Then I added a sentence that only someone like Claire would understand. Compare Q2 AR ledger with Q1 vendor costs. The revenue exists in theory, not in ledger. I hit send. Then I stared at the screen like it might burn back. That evening, I made a call I didn't want to make. To Donald Griggs, CEO of Stratwell Logistics, a legacy Armitage client. I knew Donald well. We'd closed our first deal over cheap bourbon and backgammon 15 years ago. He trusted me then. Maybe still did. Tyler misrepresented scope, he said after a long pause. Tried to lock us into a retainer with no performance benchmarks. Claimed it was industry standard. I need a favor, I said. Delay your renewal quietly. No announcement. Just sit on it. If anyone asks, say legal needs more time. He was silent. Then, you planning something? Just checking the pulse. You always were a careful surgeon, Mike. We hung up. By the weekend, small shifts began to surface. Nothing big. But investors noticed that Stratwell's name was missing from a renewal bulletin. A subtle hesitation, like a whisper before a rumor. Armitage's stock dipped 2.3%. Not a collapse. Not yet. But if you've spent your life watching numbers, you know the difference between a stumble and a slip before a fall. I stood in my garage, hands resting on the table, and looked at the corkboard now covered in red thread and yellow sticky notes. The moves were in motion. The tip was out. The board was tilting. And I was just getting started. The first crack wasn't loud. It was a late Tuesday morning when Claire Baird's piece went live. I was drinking my second coffee of the day, sitting in the garage war room, with Scout curled at my feet. The title hit me like a straight shot of adrenaline. The Emperor's hashtag, How Armitage Global Lost the Plot. It was elegant, brutal in its precision, not sensational. Claire dissected the rebranding campaign with surgical clarity. She outlined how projected ROI was based on unrealized client engagement rather than actual returns. She included redacted quotes from internal memos showing executive uncertainty. She named Tyler Jensen directly, and in the footnotes, she thanked a confidential source for surfacing key internal discrepancies. By noon, LinkedIn was on fire. Armitage's PR account posted a generic statement about external mischaracterizations, but it only made things worse. Major clients started freezing projects. Vendors asked for reassurances. The buzzwords that once looked slick in PowerPoints now sounded like punchlines. I didn't smile. Not exactly. It wasn't joy I felt. It was correction, like a bent axis righting itself after too many turns. That evening, Nadine texted down 9%. Boards rattled. Keep pressure on. Frank messaged too. Rumor is Tyler missed last 2 internal check-ins. Word is the CEO's covering. Good. Let them scramble. A week later, I got a call from the organizers of the C-Suite Vanguard conference. Tyler had been scheduled as a keynote speaker, but 2 of the event's primary sponsors pulled out after the expose. His slot was now available, and they wanted me. It was poetic. That conference had once ignored me completely. Last year they ran with flashier names, younger faces, and people with more followers than track records. But now they wanted substance. They wanted someone who didn't talk in hashtags. I said yes. Elise helped me prep my suit the night before. Charcoal gray, crisp white shirt, no tie. I didn't need one. I wasn't dressing for vanity. I was dressing for closure. The hotel ballroom was packed. Executives, analysts, and investors filled the rows. The air was cold from overzealous AC, but thick with anticipation. When I stepped on stage, I didn't hear applause at first, just silence. The curious kind, the kind that listens. I stood behind the podium and looked out across the room. 30 years in corporate strategy teaches you many things, I began. Patience, precision, how to read a balance sheet without flinching. But more than anything, it teaches you the difference between noise and value. A few heads nodded. We've entered an age where perception is sold as product, where engagement is measured in likes, not loyalty, where leadership is confused with visibility, and expertise with virality. But there's a cost to mistaking a spotlight for substance. I paused. The truth? Real leadership is often invisible. It's found in the margin notes of a long-term contract, in the 3rd revision of a client roadmap, in saying no when everyone else says yes. And that kind of leadership doesn't trend. The room stayed quiet, but it was the good kind. Listening, not drifting. I wrapped with a story, brief, sharp, about a decision I made 20 years ago that saved Armitage from a major loss because I didn't chase flash. I didn't name the company, I didn't need to. They all knew. When I stepped off the stage, they stood. Slowly at first, then steadily. Row by row. Not out of politeness, out of recognition. Later, as I walked through the lobby, people stopped me. Some just nodded. One woman from a firm in Seattle said, "You reminded us why we started this in the first place." My name started trending, not in viral circles, but in private Slack channels, in inboxes titled, "We Should Talk," and in boardrooms where truth still held weight. That night, back at home, I poured myself a drink and sat in the kitchen. Elise smiled across the counter. "Feels different this time, doesn't it?" "It does," I said. "It's not about getting back. It's about getting clear." My phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity won. Voicemail, no caller ID. I hit play. "Hi, Michael. This is Caroline. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Whitmore. He'd like to schedule a meeting, in person, at your convenience." I paused, closed my eyes. Then I tapped out a text to the number she left. "Tell him I'm booked." The slide wasn't dramatic. It was devastating. Armitage's stock dropped 37% in just under 2 weeks. A soft leak about an internal audit spread like wildfire. And once the institutional investors caught wind of the inconsistencies in reported revenue, they moved fast. Faster than Tyler could spin his way out of it. He vanished quietly. No announcement, no farewell post. Just an internal memo thanking him for pioneering innovation, followed by a press release that read like an obituary for a failed app. Then came the CEO. Pressure from the board finally broke him. Investors wanted confidence, not chaos, and his last-minute interviews only confirmed how out of touch he'd become. He resigned to pursue personal endeavors and was escorted out with less fanfare than I'd received. I'd walked out with silence. He walked out with indifference. When the call came, I wasn't surprised. Lunch at the Wexley Club in Manhattan, private room, white tablecloth, and a seat reserved for me, across from one of Armitage's most senior board members, William Arledge. Old money, sharp eyes, the kind of man who'd never sent an email in his life and still ran his empire like a chessboard carved in ivory. He smiled as I sat down. "Michael, you look good, relaxed." "Retirement fits me better than expected," I said. He nodded. "Let's not dance around it. The board wants stability, legacy, vision. We'd like you to consider coming back in an advisory role. Not full-time, of course, but enough to steer the ship." I didn't flinch, didn't reach for my espresso just yet. I let the pause hang in the air, let the weight of the offer settle between us. "Bill," I said finally, "I'm not coming back to clean up a mess I warned them about." He leaned back. "Fair. But," I continued, "I'll make you a counteroffer." His eyebrows rose, intrigued. "I'll help broker a merger. Capexon is interested. Frank Vallen's already run some preliminary models. They have the infrastructure, the market share, and they aren't bleeding trust." Arledge considered me for a long moment. "You'd give Armitage to a rival?" "No," I said. "I'd save Armitage by partnering it with a firm that knows what the hell it's doing." He didn't smile, but something in his posture softened. "What do you want?" he asked. "Control over the terms," I said. "Non-negotiable and full autonomy over the transition plan. If I'm cleaning the floor, I'm choosing the mop." He chuckled, still sharp as ever. "Still not interested in titles," I replied. We finished lunch discussing timelines. Nothing on paper yet. But the tone had shifted. I was no longer the man they'd cast aside. I was the man they needed to survive. Later that month, I stood at a podium again. But this time, it wasn't to pull anyone from wreckage. It was to build. I'd joined a think tank, small, invite-only, focused on rebuilding executive integrity in a world obsessed with optics. We weren't loud. We were precise. I started mentoring young leaders, real ones, people hungry to learn, not trend. I met a 32-year-old founder named Kiara, who reminded me of myself at her age, minus the ego. She had a razor-sharp mind and enough humility to know when to ask questions. We talked every week, sometimes about strategy, sometimes about philosophy. For the first time in years, I felt useful in a way that wasn't transactional. And one morning, while walking through Midtown, I passed the building, Armitage Global's headquarters, same glass tower, same rotating doors. But this time, I didn't keep walking. I stepped in. The lobby was quiet. A few new faces, some old ones. I didn't expect recognition, but I got it. A young man at reception looked up and stiffened slightly. A woman near the elevators glanced at me, then did a double take. "Mr. Rhodes?" she asked, approaching carefully. I just wanted to say you were right about all of it." I gave her a small nod. "Just took a little longer than I hoped." She smiled and stepped aside. I didn't stay long, just long enough. I glanced once at the hallway that used to lead to my office, that old polished floor where I had once packed my box in silence. Then I turned around. This time, I wasn't being pushed out. I was walking away because I'd already won, because I'd built something better, because I didn't need to belong there anymore. Outside, the sun cut through the towers like it was aiming just for me. And as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I exhaled, light and sure, whispering to no one in particular. Now, I walk out on my own terms.